In 72, Susan Day, the quiet, graceful star who once stole America's heart on The Partridge Family, has finally stepped out of the shadows, revealing a truth that left fans stunned, emotional, and deeply moved. For decades, she avoided interviews, declined reunions, and chose a life away from Hollywood's spotlight. Many wondered why she disappeared. Some feared the worst. But only now has the full story come into focus, and it's more heartbreaking, inspiring, and human than anyone imagined. Her journey has been shaped by private battles, long-held regrets, and a lifetime spent trying to protect her peace. Friends say Susan carried the weight of fame more heavily than most. She guarded her privacy with everything she had, even turning down opportunities that could have brought her back into the public eye. And as the years passed, the world slowly realized Susan Day's silence was not just distance. It was self-preservation. But at 72, something changed. A rare update about her life has surfaced, giving fans a glimpse into what she's been facing, what she's been healing from, and what she wishes people truly understood about her journey. It's tender. It's emotional. And for many lifelong fans, it's nearly impossible not to shed a tear, because behind the talent, behind the beauty, behind the iconic role, was a woman carrying more than anyone ever knew. For millions who grew up in the 1970s, Susan Day wasn't just another actress. She was a symbol of innocence, beauty, and quiet confidence. As Laurie Partridge on The Partridge Family, she became one of the most beloved teenage stars in television history. Her calm presence, natural charm, and expressive eyes made her unforgettable. But what fans didn't see was that Susan, even at the height of her fame, struggled deeply with the spotlight that the rest of the world assumed she loved. Behind the bright lights and the cheerful songs of the show, Susan felt overwhelmed. She was barely out of high school when fame hit her, yet she was suddenly expected to be polished, perfect, and emotionally mature enough to handle the pressures of an industry known for its intensity. She didn't grow up dreaming of stardom, it simply happened. And while millions adored her, she often felt isolated, unsure how to protect herself from the emotional toll of instant fame. Things became even more complicated as she grew older. Fans noticed her beauty and elegance, but Hollywood noticed something else: potential. Susan received countless offers, new roles, high-profile appearances, interviews, and magazine features. Yet each opportunity also carried expectations. The more popular she became, the more she felt her own identity slipping away. She once confided to a friend that she felt trapped between who the world wanted her to be and who she really was. Her experience on The Partridge Family shaped her deeply, but so did the pressures that came with it. During these years, Susan faced personal struggles that she kept hidden. She was dealing quietly with insecurity, emotional exhaustion, and the heavy weight of being a young woman thrust into the public eye. And unlike many of her co-stars, Susan didn't have the desire to maintain a lifelong relationship with Hollywood. The fame she gained from the show became both a blessing and a burden. When the series ended, fans expected her to continue climbing in Hollywood. And for a while she did. She took on film roles, modeled, and even earned critical acclaim later for her role in LA Law, proving that she had real and lasting talent. But despite this success, the same inner conflict remained. Every time she stepped onto a set or into an interview, she felt the same emotional weight she had carried since her teenage years. By the time Susan reached her 40s, the struggle became clearer. If fame wasn't making her happy, it was wearing her down. She began declining roles. She avoided publicity. She became more selective, then eventually stepped back altogether. While other stars embraced red carpets and reunions, Susan moved steadily in the opposite direction. And then, she disappeared from the public eye completely. Years went by with almost no updates. No interviews, no photos, no Hollywood appearances. Fans worried, wondered, and waited. People speculated endlessly about why she walked away. Some thought she was simply tired of the industry. Others believed deeper emotional scars kept her away from the public world. The truth, however, was quietly unfolding behind closed doors. Today, at 72, the story of why Susan withdrew from the world of fame and what has happened to her in the years since is finally being understood. Her choice to step away was not weakness. It was a deeply human decision rooted in healing, reflection, and the need for a life defined by peace rather than pressure. And the revelation of what she's been facing is where the story becomes emotional, personal, and almost impossible not to shed a tear. In the years that followed her rise to fame, Susan Day's life took a path that many in Hollywood couldn't understand but quietly admired. While countless stars chased the spotlight, Susan moved farther from it with every passing year. Not because she lacked opportunity or talent, she had both in abundance, but because she knew, deep down, that remaining in the public eye was slowly draining parts of her she could never get back. Even after the Partridge Family, Susan worked steadily. She earned praise for dramatic roles, proved her range on television, and ultimately reached a new peak on LA Law, where she was celebrated as one of the most compelling actors of her generation. She won awards, earned nominations, and received the industry's respect. But behind all the success was a reality only she understood. Fame came at a cost she was no longer willing to pay. Friends close to Susan have said for years that she is intensely private. Not shy, not fragile, just deeply protective of her inner world. Early fame had taught her that once you open the door to Hollywood, the world feels entitled to every corner of your life. And Susan never wanted to live like that. As she got older, she began to turn down interviews, gently decline event invitations, and avoid the attention that once felt impossible to escape. She skipped every major Partridge Family reunion, not out of bitterness, but because returning to that chapter would reopen emotions she had worked hard to settle. In her view, some memories are better held quietly, not displayed on a stage for the world to analyze. But stepping away wasn't just about the industry, it was about her health, her peace, and her emotional well-being. After decades of pushing herself through schedules, scripts, and public expectations, Susan realized she needed rest, not just physical rest, but emotional rest. The kind of rest that allows a person to rediscover themselves after years of living in a world that demands constant performance. She once said privately that she longed for a simple life where no one is watching and no one is judging. With time, that longing became a choice, and that choice became her new life. As she grew older, Susan relocated to a quieter environment far from Hollywood's chaos. She embraced solitude, nature, reading, and a small circle of trusted people. There were no flashing cameras, no reporters waiting outside her home, no studio contracts demanding her time. For the first time since she was a teenager, she could breathe freely. But what fans didn't know, what makes this chapter so emotional, is that Susan's disappearance from the public eye wasn't just about avoiding the spotlight. It was also about healing wounds that fame had deepened over the years. She carried heavy emotional memories from her youth, regrets about relationships she wished she had handled differently, and a lifetime of introspection that only began once she finally stepped away. At 72, the people around her describe her as someone who values peace more than anything. Someone who has learned to protect her heart by controlling what enters her world. And in many ways, that became her salvation. Yet hearing this story now, fans can't help but feel a mix of sadness and admiration. Sadness for the struggles she endured quietly. Admiration for the strength it took to walk away from an industry that rarely lets people leave untouched. What happened to Susan Day is not a tragedy. It's a portrait of a woman who chose her soul over fame. But the emotional part of her journey, the part that brings tears to the eyes of lifelong fans, becomes even clearer as the truth of her life today is revealed. As Susan Day entered her 70s, the world rarely caught even a glimpse of her. No new interviews, no surprise appearances, no public statements, and for a long time fans feared the worst. But the truth about her life today, while emotional, is not tragic. It is tender, deeply human, and shaped by the quiet strength she spent a lifetime building. Those close to Susan describe her as someone who has become profoundly reflective. She spends her life in stillness now, far away from the noise that once consumed her youth. Her days are simple, reading, writing in journals, taking slow walks, staying connected to only a handful of people she trusts. She is not missing. She is living the way she always wished she could, but emotional truth sits at the center of her story. At 72, Susan has had to face memories she avoided for decades. Fame gave her success, but it also left her with emotional scars she kept private. Regrets from her teenage years, pressure from the Hollywood machine, personal relationships she wishes she had navigated differently, and the lingering belief that she never fully fit into the version of herself the world adored. Much of her emotional journey today revolves around acceptance. Accepting her past. Accepting the decisions that shaped her life. Accepting the things she can't change. And most importantly, accepting that she doesn't owe the world her presence anymore. But the part of her story that touches fans the most is the fact that Susan has chosen a life without public recognition. Not because she has something to hide, but because she has finally made peace with her own story. She no longer feels the need to explain, defend, or relive the past. She no longer feels pressure to meet expectations. She has let go. Still, there is a bitter sweetness to her solitude. Those close to her say Susan occasionally looks back on her acting years with mixed emotions. There is pride. She knows how much she meant to audiences. There is gratitude. She cherishes the people she worked with. But there is also sadness. Not regret for leaving, but sadness that fame took so much from her before she had the chance to understand what she truly wanted. One emotional reality that shaped her later years is her deep sensitivity. Susan always felt things more intensely than most people realized. The criticisms, the comparisons, the demands, they cut deeply. And it wasn't until she stepped away completely that she allowed herself to process the impact of it all. At 72, Susan is not seeking attention, nor is she waiting for a comeback. She has chosen a life defined by privacy, peace, and emotional clarity. She has spent years repairing her relationship with herself, something fame never gave her time to do. And in many ways, this retreat from the world is a quiet victory. But for fans who grew up watching her, who adored her, who saw her as a part of their childhood, finally understanding the truth hits hard. Because the girl they loved on their screens endured far more than they ever imagined. And the woman she has become carries that history with quiet grace. In a world where celebrities broadcast every detail of their lives, Susan's silence is powerful. It is intentional. It is healing, and as she moves through her 70s, one thing is clear. She didn't disappear. She finally found a life where she could simply exist without pressure, without scrutiny, and without the weight of an industry that never truly understood her. But the final part of her story, the part that brings the deepest emotional impact, is what her journey means now, and what message she would want fans to take from it. As Susan Day moved further into her 70s, fans hoped she would finally step back into the spotlight. Even for a moment. But instead, she chose something very different, something quieter, something far more personal, and in many ways, something far more heartbreaking. At 72, Susan has become almost impossible to find, even in an age where every public figure leaves a digital trail behind. Her friends say it isn't because she dislikes her fans, nor because she regrets her work. It's because she carries a lifetime of emotional weight, decades of pressure, insecurities, complicated relationships, and memories she has never fully shared with the world. People often forget that Susan entered the public eye too early. She was only a teenager when the Partridge Family transformed her into the face of American television. Millions adored her, yet behind the camera she struggled intensely with self-image, silence, and the pressures of perfection. And those shadows, they didn't disappear with age. They followed her. In her 70s, Susan reportedly spends much of her time focused on the one thing she never truly had during her chaotic rise to fame: peace. She avoids cameras, avoids interviews, and even avoids most public events. Her former castmates, including Shirley Jones, have said that Susan's retreat wasn't bitterness. It was healing. After a lifetime of being watched, judged, and compared, Susan simply needed enough quiet to finally breathe. But there is another part of her story, one that leaves fans emotional. Sources close to her have quietly shared that Susan has faced increasing health concerns. Nothing sensational or dramatic, just the slow, heavy changes that come with age. Intensified by years of stress her body never had the chance to recover from. She has chosen privacy not because she fears judgment, but because she doesn't want sympathy. She never wanted to be seen as fragile, never wanted her legacy defined by illness, never wanted fans worrying about her. And yet, some fans do worry, because they care, because she was part of their childhoods, because she lit up screens in a way that felt warm and familiar, like someone you believed you knew. Today, at 72, Susan lives far away from Hollywood, surrounded by only a small circle of trusted people. She no longer watches her old work, and she avoids discussing her acting days because, as one friend put it, those memories are heavier than people realize. She keeps a simple routine, reading, being outdoors, enjoying quiet moments that fame once denied her. And though she no longer steps in front of cameras, the impact she left remains. Her portrayal of Laurie Partridge still resonates with generations who found comfort in her softness, her innocence, and the gentleness she brought to an industry that often demanded hardness. Even now, fans rewatch those episodes and feel a tug in their chest, wondering how someone so bright ended up so hidden. But maybe, just maybe, this is exactly what Susan wants. Not applause, not headlines, not a comeback, just a life she can finally call her own. Still, when people hear what has happened to her, her retreat from public life, her ongoing health struggles, her quiet solitude, it's hard not to feel emotional. This woman who brought joy to millions now lives in silence, far from the world that once adored her, and that's why fans say, try not to cry. Because Susan Day wasn't just a star, she was a piece of their memories. A reminder of a gentler era, and seeing her fade from the world's view at 72 feels like losing a part of that time forever.